Good afternoon and welcome to TalkSports, Saturday Sports Special to be exact. And it's a weekend edition and lots to talk about to this weekend in particular. And no doubt track and field holding the spotlight, but there's also cricket, there's football and other sporting developments. Oh, not forgetting the Olympics, because obviously track and field has some bearing to do with the Olympics. And then we had the CONCACAF World Cup preliminary round, some interesting results last evening, and lots to talk about. But again, I'm coming to you live from Minneapolis in Minnesota this weekend, and joining me is no other person than my special guest who will be talking about other issues. And by the way, hopefully sometime later on, I'm hoping to link up with Miss Harvey Glantz, Coach Harvey Glantz in Stockholm, because as you know, on Sunday, there'll be the Diamond League in Stockholm, and he'll give us a little update as to what's taking place, not just with himself and Kirani and the Kirani James thing, but preparations for the Olympics. So once again, as I said, Mr. Terry Finester is joining me live from St. Lucia. Yes, he is in Grosile. Yeah, is in Grosile. Yeah, in St. Lucia. Right.
Yeah, Mike, I'm having a little bit of.
Hold on, let me see. Yeah, okay. I think I'm hearing you clearly now.
Be able to get through there?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm hearing you. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining me, Terry. And as I indicated in the start, that lots to talk about. Obviously, the headline grabber this week has been, and still continuing, is the big discussion on Sha'Carri Richardson, and no doubt the Queen sensation for the United States, and all eyes were basically on what is likely to be a major showdown between the Americans and the Jamaicans at the Olympic Games, especially in the 100 meters. Anticlimax, to say the least, because as we heard, within the last 48 hours, the situation regarding Sha'Carri Richardson and the failed drug test, albeit marijuana. And a lot of discussions on that, but we have a lot to discuss. First, Terry, when you heard that, what was your first reaction?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, of course, that the news came from a Caribbean journalist, first and foremost, Andrew Lowe, a colleague over at the Gleaner. So congratulations to him on getting that big scoop. A lot of folks, especially in the U.S., questioning the validity and the veracity of the initial report coming from somebody outside of the U.S. and outside of the big U.S. sports. But as I noted at the time, a lot of those big outlets don't really cover sports, and certainly don't cover track and field to the extent that somebody like Andre, they wouldn't be plugged in the way that Andre would be. Having had it verified, having Sha'Carri herself come out and speak on it, obviously massively disappointing. That she won't be at the games. Certainly is going to be a big loss for the US and a big loss as well for the spectacle of the Olympic Games. So a lot of people would have been looking forward, as you said, to that big showdown. A lot of really strong women in the 100 meters this year. Sha'Carri probably at or near the top of that list, along with certainly the Jamaican trio led by Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, Blessing Okekbari. We just saw Maria Tolu coming out this week with a really fast time as well. So lots of excitement around the event still. but certainly the excitement that Sha'Carri had built up, and we see it. We've seen the reaction coming from not just the track and field, not just sports people, but coming from the entertainment world. Drake, Gabriel Union, Dwayne Wade, lots of people throwing support. I mean, even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez throwing their support behind Sha'Carri Richardson. So it's her entry into athletics has broaden the appeal of the sport, broaden the appeal certainly of the event, and it's unfortunate that we will have lost her going into this period.
Well, I know definitely it's a big loss to track and field, albeit there's talk that she may compete at the relay event.
In the relays
event. Judging from what she is saying, she will accept it. But it's glad also to know, Terry, that she basically accepted responsibility for her actions. Albeit there have been a lot of U.S. politicians who have gotten into the fray of things, and I don't think it's always well for sports. For the politicians to get so involved, because then you ask, where do you draw the line? We have had so many other athletes who have, fallen to the rules, and they have been basically silent. There's an example of Christian Coleman, for example, and his situation was more about whereabouts.
Brianna Rollins this week lost her appeal.
Lost her appeal.
So there are a number of those.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying,
even Grenada has had their own whereabouts situation. A lot of people felt could and should have been contested a little bit more stringently. So there have been a number of situations that and Namibia now facing a problem with their two young sprint stars. Who have been declared to be DSD athletes, from what we're hearing coming out of Namibia. We haven't had an official statement from World Athletics as yet, but Mboma running the fastest 400-meter time by an under-20 woman ever earlier this week. But we're from what we're hearing, again coming out of Namibia, from what we're hearing, it appears that that time is not going to be the World Under-20 record. So there are a lot of similar situations, and I think that it's always good to have conversations about the rules. It's unfortunate that those only really come into sharp relief when the rules are infringed. So it's only when we see those rules broke. So I mean, now hopefully we are going to have a conversation about marijuana, about cannabis, and where it stands as far as the prohibited list is concerned. But that is probably something that ought to have happened quite a while ago. We're going to continue to have conversations about DSD athletes. We're going to have to continue to refine the whereabouts criteria and how those work, and to establish and conclude that they are indeed working for the benefit of the sport, and that the athletes are not being disadvantaged. So, I mean, rules are always going to be refined. Rules are always going to be looked at, are always going to be interrogated, and they're going to hopefully get better and make for a better sport.
Well, a lot, and I think coming out of that, Terry, you're correct. The conversation, it augurs well for the conversation going forward. And I'm certain that it took something like that, to bring forward that sort of conversation. I'm certain, like you would have been reading some of the social media, and so much have been talked about, and whether or not I saw one, I don't know if you saw that, whether or not the USA should pull out funding from WADA, whatever it is, along this line. But certainly, as we said, Terry, the conversation will continue regarding how we go forward with issues as marijuana, for example. How we go forward with issues of whereabouts, another example. How do we do that?
Sorry, Bas. Just a little bit of interruption in the studio here. I'm just going to get my co-host out.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Now, bye-bye. Sorry. So
These
yes,
things,
we would.
yeah, these things always. I had a similar situation with my little co-host at one point in time. But these things do happen. But the
But yes, you were
conversation,
saying
yeah,
about the
yeah.
rules and refining the rules and where we
Mhm,
go from there.
mhm.
And yeah, and it's absolutely true. We're in the Olympic period, and one of the other situations that even when you look at some of the national federations and their rules as far as qualifying, I mean, the defending Olympic champion in the 110-meter hurdles is not going to be at Tokyo 2020, Mama Cloud.
Right.
He
Yeah.
didn't have a good competition. He explained why, in his mind, he didn't have a good competition. But the bottom line is that the rules of his federation are that you must finish in the top three in order to command a place in the team. He didn't do so, and so he's out. He had a horrible, horrible final after running the two of the fastest times in the world earlier this year. This year, rather, in the previous evening in the semifinals, and a few weeks ago, he ran what at the time was the fastest time in the world. So I mean, he's obviously ready. If you threw him into the Olympic final, one would assume that he would be somewhere in the mix, along with naturally Grant Holloway and Bedosian of France. But he didn't make the final. He didn't make the top three. Jamaica does have some really, really. I think our last conversation we talked about how much strength and depth Jamaica had in the 110 hurdles. They have some tremendous athletes, and they're certainly going to go out there and make some noise in that event. But obviously unfortunate that the defending champion doesn't have the opportunity to go out and defend his title when he is in fact healthy and ready and raring to go. Similarly, Trinidad and Tobago, Tyra Gittens not making it to the Olympics in the heptathlon, despite having the seventh best heptathlon mark in the world this year, and I think it's the 12th best or something, or the 13th best over the last 3 years. And she's not at the Olympics for heptathlon. She is going for long jump. She's going for long jump for a long jump mark that she attained in the same heptathlon that did not qualify her
Yeah.
to go to Tokyo. And she's not going because she's not ranked in the top, I think, 24 in her event. She's like 2 out. And she's not ranked in the top 24 because the event, the meet at which she qualified was not of a sufficient standard in order to gain her rankings points. So it's the same height hurdles, the same dimensions pit. The high jump is the same height as it would be put anywhere else. She's cleared all of those marks. But because her competition level is not deemed to be sufficient, somebody who has not performed at her level is going to go to the Olympics in her place. And those are things that we have to rationalize and make sense of, I think, and they don't always work to provide the best possible spectacle and to provide the best possible opportunity for athletes.
Well, it's it's quite interesting on that because, as you rightly said, and I had that in mind, the African runners who are not competing in what is it, 400 or the 200? I
They're
think you
not
mentioned
competing in the 400. They're
in the
being
400.
disallowed from
Yeah.
competing in the 400. Mboma actually ran a world lead. She's 19 or going on 19. She ran a world lead, which is also I think the seventh fastest time in the world, and would have been a world junior record. Herself and Maselingi are being disallowed from running the 400 because it is the lowest distance that a DSD athlete can be disqualified from. So DSD athletes are disqualified from, I think it's 400 up to a mile. They are not disallowed from the 100, not disallowed from 200. And just for those who are asking, DSD athletes are athletes who are different sexual development, differentiated sexual development. So what it is that these two young ladies, like Caster Semenya, for instance, they've been deemed to have higher levels of naturally, so their body naturally produces higher levels of testosterone than the IAAF allows for women competitors. And again, all of this is coming out of Namibia. So we haven't had any official word from World Athletics on this as yet. But what we're hearing is that they're not going to be able to compete. We've seen that they're withdrawn from the 400-meter list for Tokyo. So it all fits together, but we haven't had an official statement on it just yet.
Okay. Well, Terry, so what we'll do on Friday, Sha'Carri Richardson spoke to NBC. Yes, NBC today. She had a live interview, exclusive interview with NBC today. And what I'll do, just a few minutes of that interview, I'll play it, and then we'll come back and discuss what she had to say.
We're back 8:13 now with the stunning news tied to the Tokyo Olympics that we've been following all morning, Savannah.
Yeah, Sha'Carri Richardson, the U.S. women's 100-meter champion who dominated at the Olympic trials, has tested positive for marijuana following that race. And this morning, that has put her Olympic future in doubt. Sha'Carri's going to be with us for an exclusive live interview just ahead.
But first, more on Richardson's remarkable journey that's drawn her comparisons to the legendary FloJo and what could be a stunning disappointment for an athlete who's won the hearts of millions. With a blazing time and standout style, Sha'Carri Richardson recently punched her ticket to Tokyo.
Richardson's going to Tokyo!
Unbelievable. The fact that I am an Olympian, no matter what is said or anything, I am an Olympian.
At the Olympic trials, the 21-year-old Dallas native won the 100-meter dash in a blazing 10.86 seconds, making her the fastest woman in America. But now it appears her Olympic dreams may have been put on hold. A U.S. Olympic source telling NBC News she failed a drug test after her finals win, testing positive for THC, the chemical found in marijuana. According to her lawyers, Sha'Carri has been suspended from the Olympic team, and her failed test may cause her to lose her spot on Team USA entirely. Her Olympic trial results were automatically disqualified when she tested positive. That means she won't be allowed to compete in her signature event, the 100 meters. But there appears to be an outside chance she could compete in a different event. What's unclear is whether she will appeal the test results and the disqualification, or how long her suspension will last. NBC News has reached out to the USA Track and Field for official comment. Sha'Carri captured the hearts of millions when she ran into the stands after her victory and hugged her grandmother just a week after losing her biological mother.
My family has kept me grounded. This year has been crazy for me. Going from just last week, losing my biological mother, and I'm still here.
And after being notified of her failed drug test, Richardson tweeted yesterday, "I am human." Savannah.
Chanel, thank you. And Sha'Carri Richardson joins us now. Good morning, Sha'Carri. I just want to ask a simple question first. How are you doing?
I'm blessed to be alive. That's about it.
This is not easy. This is a hard moment that you're in right now. And I thank you for being on. And I know you wanted to tell your story. So tell me, what happened? What led up to this positive test?
Just honestly, I want to take responsibility for my actions. I know what I did. I know what I'm supposed to do. No, I'm allowed not to do. And I still made that decision. But not making an excuse or looking for any empathy in my case. But just, however, being in that position of my life, finding out something like that, something that I would say is probably one of the biggest things that have impacted me positively and negatively in my life when it comes to dealing with the relationship I have with my mother. So that definitely was a very heavy topic on me, and people don't understand what it's like to have to, or people do. We all have our different struggles. We all have our different things we deal with. But to put on a face, to have to go in front of the world and put on a face and hide my pain. Like, who, I don't know, who are you, or who am I to tell you how to cope when you're dealing with a pain, or you're dealing with a struggle that you've never experienced before, or that you've never thought you would have to deal with. Like, who am I to tell you how to cope? Who am I to tell you that you're wrong for hurting? So I think just honestly, just leading up to that, dealing with my mental health, dealing with my mental as is with leading up to the games. Every time stepping on the track, definitely expect it to be a record-breaking time or something like that. So just with that, pressure in itself was also just another thing. With this actually been my first full professional career, my first full professional circuit this year due to the pandemic. So just considering all of that put together, long time, my agent, my sponsor, my sponsorship, my family, knowing me dealing with all of this during time. So,
Sha'Carri, I just want people to understand where you're coming from, and tell me if this is correct. But it was a few days before your big race in the trials, you found out that your biological mother had passed away. You found out when a reporter told you, and it was after that you ingested some kind of marijuana. I should mention, you were in Oregon. It's legal in Oregon. You didn't violate any law, but it was against the rules of your sport, and as you said, you knew that. But is that what happened? Is that how this unfolded?
Honestly, yes, that is the story. I had an interview scheduled with my agent. I knew I was having an interview. I knew going into the interview, like I was just thinking it would be a normal interview, and then on the interview to hear that information come from a complete stranger was definitely triggering. Was definitely nerve shocking, because it's just like, how are you to tell me that? Like, it's like, and no offense against him at all. He's just doing his job, but definitely that sent me in a state of mind, in a state of emotional panic, if anything. And still knowing that even though I'm here, I still have to go out and put on a performance for my dream, go out there and still compete to what it is. So yes, definitely triggered, and from there just blinded by emotions, blinded by sadness, blinded by just hiding hurt, honestly. For the fact that I know that I can't hide myself, so at least in some type of way, I was just trying to hide my pain.
Yeah. The Olympic officials, the U.S. track and field, the anti-doping agencies now have a decision before them. Unfortunately, you will not be able to compete in the Olympics in your race, your individual race, 100 meters. But there is a chance. It's a small chance, but there's a chance you could go to the Olympics and take part in the relay. Are you hopeful for that? Is that what you're holding out hope for at this moment?
Right now, I'm just putting all of my time and energy into dealing with what I need to deal with to heal myself. So if I'm allowed to receive that blessing, then I'm grateful for it. But if not right now, I'm going to just focus on myself.
What would your message be to those who are considering that right now, who are thinking about that, and to your fans, who have fallen in love with you and were so proud of your performance and maybe crushed just as you are in that moment? What would you want to say to them?
I would like to say to my fans and my family, my sponsorship, to the haters too. I apologize as much as I'm disappointed. I know that when I step on the track, I don't represent myself. I represent a community that has shown me great support, great love. And to y'all, I failed y'all. And so I apologize for the fact that I didn't know how to control my emotions or deal with my emotions during that time. And what I would just leave with my fans, or I would just leave out there, is that, like I tweeted and said yesterday, I'm human. We're human. My statement, what I always say in my interviews, I want to be as transparent as possible with you guys. whether it's good, whether it's bad. But when it comes to Sha'Carri Richardson, it's never been a steroid. It will never be a steroid attached to the name Sha'Carri Richardson. The charge and what the situation was marijuana. I'm not encouraging anybody to do it. I'm not saying, oh, don't do it or anything like that. But if you choose to do things in your personal time or things like that, you just should know, or beware of the consequences, or just know, or just find different ways to just cope or do what it is that will make you feel better. But sitting here, I just say, don't judge me because I am human. I'm you. I just happen to run a little faster. I understand there's going to be people that still have something to say that don't necessarily understand. And I wouldn't even call them haters if they want to choose to show their character of a person, even after me saying what I've said, and putting myself out there, then that's just on you, your character, and you have to live with that. But I greatly appreciate being able to tell my side of the story. And like I said to my fans, my family, my sponsorship, and the haters, I greatly apologize if I let you guys down, and I did. And I just want to let y'all know this will be the last time the Olympics don't cheat Sha'Carri Richardson, and this will be the last time the U.S. Doesn't come home with a gold medal in 100. And I feel
Sha'Carri.
lines up against me.
Right. Hey, Terry, let's leave it there for now because I think we basically heard everything we wanted to hear, including the apology, an apology to her family, her friends, fans, sponsors, even her haters, as she indicated. But on a serious note, do you think that whatever the situation, and some people might just consider it to be trivial, that her legacy, and short as it is, in terms of she has not won any world titles or anything as yet, but that will be tarnished in the future?
The substance that she's taken, she acknowledges and claims that she made a mistake in a vulnerable moment, an extremely vulnerable moment. I think any of us can sympathize with this situation that she found herself in, being told by a stranger that her mother had passed away. What choices you make in that moment, whether you those are the choices that you would make yourself or not. I think it's understandable that she would find herself in that in that kind of situation, or make those kind of choices or those decisions in that moment. Having said that, she's also fully aware of what she has done. She has acknowledged that she knows the rules, that she knew that she had contravened the rules, and she's taken full responsibility. So she moves on. It's not a major infraction. So she's going to be able to resume her career after the Olympics, get involved in the Diamond League. Next year, hopefully, we'll see her at World Championships. A lot of people, even in the US, have problems with her level of confidence and with her saying things like, this is going to be the last time that the US is not going to be on top of the medal rostrum, because they to their mind, it smacks of disrespect for her teammates, well, her potential teammates, and here's another thing, Bass. A lot of times, somebody I think just this week, somebody was saying it might have been Yanis David or somebody. It was asking, if it's all right now to call themselves an Olympian, and until you have competed at the Olympics, you're not an Olympian.
Yeah.
At the US trials, we hear a lot about so and so has placed in the top 3 and they are an Olympian. You're not an Olympian until you've gone there. So Sha'Carri Richardson, 2 weeks ago, in her mind and in the minds of most of the US track and field fans, was an Olympian.
Mm-hmm.
And here she is, 2 weeks later. She is not, in fact, going to Tokyo, at least unless they make that decision on the 4x1, which I think is unlikely. But unless that decision is made to add her to the 4x1 pool, she's not going to be an Olympian, at least until 2024. So, there's that relatively small side element of it, that unless you have been to the Olympics, you're not an Olympian.
Yeah, that's true. And listening to her, and then going back to that article, I think I've sent you that link, but there was an article that was published in the Irish Times last week.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, because I know it will come up in some sort of discussion. The article headline: Sha'Carri Richardson's image sullied by doping shadow of Dennis Mitchell. It was written in the Irish Times, not today, not yesterday, but actually on the 24th of June, which was last Thursday. And in it, Dave Hannigan, who is the writer, started off with all the accolades, to Richardson in terms of 21-year-old from Dallas, the new sensation, etc., all of that. And then in it, he said, yet in nearly every interaction with the media, Richardson also pays homage to her coach, citing him as the one of the only people who truly understands the struggles she has endured. And therein lies a problem, according to the article. And we know about Dennis Mitchell. Her coach is Dennis Mitchell. You may remember the name. You may even recall the sullied reputation. Finished fourth in the 100 meters final at the 1988 Olympics, the so-called dirtiest race in history. What came after was a career so tawdry that when the Sports Doping Hall of Fame is finally built, Mitchell deserves his own display, somewhere between the Lance Armstrong wall of tattered yellow jerseys and the glass case containing the full image of Barry Bonds' incredible expanded helmets. He might not quite have enjoyed the same stature as that pair, but he has left his own indelible mark on cheating culture. Goes to show, as they say, birds of a feather flock together, But it's interesting, Terry, that article came out last week. And basically, while acknowledging the accomplishments and the performances of Richardson, also tied it in with Dennis Mitchell in terms of a warning, and their lives about a week or so after we hearing about this thing. Not that it's coincidental, but just that in reference. Also, Terry, I don't know if you recall, in the start of this NBC exclusive, it's almost as if NBC is claiming, almost as if they're claiming that they broke the story. USA track and field official confirmed to NBC, etc., etc. Hey, nowhere at all in the US media have they quoted that, according to the Jamaica Gleaner, according to an exclusive in the Jamaica Gleaner. In fact, there were so many attempts to throw cold water on that story when it came out that they branded as fake news. You would have seen it in some of the social media posting as fake news, And I have to say kudos to the Jamaica Gleaner and Andre Lowe for that expose. And then there was also the question why it is coming from Jamaica. Obviously the rivalry between Jamaica and the USA. They are questioning the authenticity of the story coming from Jamaica. Terry, have you realized that? Have you gathered that? Have you been sensing that?
Yeah, from the start, like I said, there was that skepticism regarding the origin of the story and the fact that it came from Jamaica. But as I said, Andre is tapped into track and field. He's tapped into football. Those are the principal sports, as far as I know, that he reports on. So he would have sources, and as you know, Mike, sources are built up over years. You have relationships, you have a level of trust, you have a level of understanding. If I hear a story from ESPN on NBA basketball or on the NFL or on Major League Baseball, I trust it because I know that they have sources, and especially depending on the individual who breaks the story. I trust that these individuals have sources in NBA basketball. We know if it comes from Woj or Shams, it's real. And in track and field, there are people that you know that can be trusted to have good sources, to have reliable sources, and Andre is one such. So I mean, people are entitled to trust what they want to trust. As I said at the beginning, time will tell, and the time has told, and the full story, the true story has come out, and we'll see if there are any repercussions. But going back to the Dennis Mitchell thing, I think sometimes we can tend to make a mountain out of a molehill. Dennis Mitchell did and people who are found guilty of doping have contravened the rules. They are wrong. There are repercussions therefore. If the World Athletics, if the governing body deems that these people are allowed back into the sport because they have done their time, because there's a certain period during which they have to be clean, they're going to be retested, they're going to be subject to all the same rules when they return to the sport. Dennis Mitchell contravened the rules. He did something wrong. Give some fantastic story about Bear and his wife and having sex all night and whatever have you. He did something wrong. He was found guilty. He faced the consequences. The end. I mean, this idea that people not supposed to ever be involved in athletics because they did something wrong, I think that's ridiculous. I think that is contrary to the way that society ought to conduct itself, and certainly contrary to the way that sport ought to be conducted. If you do something wrong, yes, you may face greater scrutiny thereafter. But if you have been found thereafter to be clean, and nobody has found anything new about you, nobody has found any further, the irregularities concerning your activities and your conduct, then so be it. You're clean, move on. Now, this idea that you forever tainted, I don't subscribe to that at all.
Mm-hmm. Therefore, you think that someone as Justin Gatlin has paid his dues and deserves to be competing as he is competing, right?
Justin Gatlin was found to have contravened the rules, I think twice. There are a number of other Caribbean athletes who've been found to have contravened the rules. Americans have been found to contravene the rules. The Canadians, obviously, famously Ben Johnston. I mean, the rules are the rules, and the rules are, like I said, by and large, the rules are good. The rules are there for the protection of the sport and the protection of clean athletes. The rules are open to interrogation, open to refinement, open to change. And we do from time to time have to look at the rules and see that they are indeed doing the job that they are designed to do, which is to ensure that we have a clean and fair sport. But the rules are there. You contravene the rules, you pay the consequences, you move on. 2 years out of the sport, 5 years out of the sport. Brianna Rollins right now is facing 5 years out of the sport. That is a massive, massive hit. Michelle Liai is just returning from her suspension, from a 2-year suspension. So you face time out. You do what you have to do. You keep yourself mentally and physically ready to come back. You do the necessary. In a number of cases, we've had people who have had whereabouts findings, adverse findings related to whereabouts. They may not have turned up for a test, or may not have been where they said they would be, and they face a substantial amount of time out of the sport. So it's we want to ensure that the rules are working to the benefit of not just the governing body and not just of the sport, but that they're working for the athletes as well, and that they make sense for the athletes. And if you have done your time, you've done your time. Similarly, if there's natural justice, you've done what you had to do to serve your sentence, and you move on.
Well, as you indicated, that there are those who are paying the price for whereabout and whereabout failure, though some may consider it to be a foolish foolish rule. It's part of the rules and you have to adhere to it. And that's how it is. Good afternoon to you, Theo. Duncan, I know you are looking at us, and I don't know, obviously Terry always has some fans somewhere, yeah. But talking about the foolish rule, let's listen to the comment from two Fox Sports commentators on that issue regarding what they consider to be some of the foolish rules in the IAAF.
We all have our different struggles. We all have our different things we deal with. But to put on a face and have to go out in front of the world and put on a face and hide my pain, who are you? Who am I to tell you how to cope when you're dealing with a pain or you're dealing with a struggle that you never experienced before or that you never thought you would have to deal with? So, Marcellus Wiley, I know we talk track more than any other show. What is your reaction to Sha'Carri Richardson potentially missing the Olympics over a failed drug test?
Yeah, my first reaction is I'm actually relieved because of the circumstances. I'm going to be real about this. I owe her an apology that mentally I was having a conversation thinking when the news broke that it was performance enhancing, steroids, etc. And then it came out to be weed. And then I realized, oh, okay, I know what's going on right here because I've been through this situation before. I did lose my mother while I was still an active player in the NFL. And you know what? It didn't give me a license to ill. It did not give me a license to break rules and restrictions. The thing about this one is so many players that used to smoke weed and play, I had teammates as well. There's a Percy Harvin quote out there that says it wasn't a game he played in 9 years that he wasn't high. Percy Harvin. So I know that this has always been around the culture. Let's talk about the circumstances, because the guys who used to play and used to get high used to always say, don't pay the stupid tax. And what is the stupid tax? That means you know when they're going to test, and you also know the amount they're going to test for. Don't get caught. So in this situation, I'm looking at Sha'Carri and I'm saying simply, you got two choices, not three. You thought you had a third. Don't smoke weed, whatever the marijuana, edibles, whatever you are, or smoke it and don't get caught. But then in this world today, there's a third option, I think, that is being feelings driven. It's being driven by your own justifications of behavior. And it's really reversing the equation of logic. So people are going through their own circumstances. I went through my circumstance and losing my mother. And then because they're going through that circumstance, they think that is now going to empower them to do what they want to do. And that's not how the world works. We talk about this situation right now. It's unfortunate. It certainly is a trivial conversation about the legalization of weed in America and in sports. We'll get to that. But the point is, I'm sorry, you knew the rules, you broke them. You got to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I will start by saying this. You could submit that Sha'Carri's support staff and society failed her in not adequately providing her athletically legal ways to grieve and to cope with the loss of her mother, as I'm sure she's still trying to do. Now, with that being said, there are stupid rules in sports.
Okay.
But you still have to adhere to the stupid rules in sports, regardless of how stupid they are.
Yeah.
Before there was Sha'Carri Richardson, there was a man by the name of Christian Coleman. You want to know why we ain't talking about Christian Coleman? Because he's suspended right now.
Yeah, here you go.
And he's suspended because of a stupid rule. In track and field, if you have a whereabouts failure, 3 of them over 12 months, you get suspended. Christian Coleman had a whereabouts failure. As an Olympic athlete or an aspiring Olympic athlete, you have to update your location whenever and wherever you travel to. Because if a drug tester comes to your home and you are not there, strike one. So Christian Coleman, reigning world champion in the 100 meters, he's not going to be at the Olympics this year because of a stupid rule. Gabby Thomas, the fastest living woman to run the 200 meters. She just ran the fastest time ever, second to FloJo. She was provisionally suspended because she had a whereabouts failure, 3 of them. If not by the grace of an Uber receipt showing that she was home when the drug tester said she wasn't, we would not be seeing her, the fastest woman alive in over 200 meters, running at the Olympics.
Yeah.
A stupid rule. But you got to adhere to stupid rules. We have seen greater athletes be punished for longer for something lesser because of stupid rules. So the fact of the matter is, regardless of how dumb the rule is, you have to adhere to it. Now, it's a loss for a lot of people. Probably the fans,
Yeah.
Sha'Carri, Nike, the games. It's a loss for a lot of people. But so, as I look at it, let's please not make this racial.
Who did that?
Everybody trying to. It's
Wow.
not racial. It is not an American rule. The rule for her suspension is because of WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency. World. It is not about America, and it is not about trying to hold someone down because of the color of their skin or because of their race. There are so many racial issues in society that we have to be very accurate when we try to bring them up. It is not an American restriction. It is a world restriction. So that's the other thing on my first lap that I just needed to clarify.
Yeah, I'm glad that you talked about it in those terms. And you really put the boundaries out there, and I want to expand on those boundaries. One, missing your testing up to 3 times is not even a stupid rule in itself, because the guys who are guilty are intentionally missing those tests.
Could be true.
So there's, no, ain't no could be true. It is true. Let me tell you that. 2, Sha'Carri, you lost your discipline, and now you're going to be disciplined. I'm going to remind you of something you told me before that is actually one of the great Wiley-isms. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. Now, what clouds this one is, it's not her own doing. She's grieving a loss. So in that grieving process, what are the consequences of your actions? And what this situation shows us that there could be grave consequences, because the Olympics only comes one every 4 years, grave consequences by your choices. But it's still a stupid tax that you gotta pay. And I want people to separate the emotional pull of her losing her mother from the reality of this is not still an opportunity for you to not abide by the rules. Let me tell you about these same rules from WADA, from USADA. God, this is so easy. The drug is banned in competition periods. Okay, so far most people are like, what does that mean? It's defined as beginning at 11:59 at night on the day before a competition and ending at its conclusion. Come on now. Come on, man. Wait a minute. You just basically told me a few hours. You got to be under 150 nanograms per milliliter. Okay, so now we're having a different conversation, because in reality, smoking weed, whatever your marijuana level was it right before the race? Was it a part of your training cycle? Because marijuana stays in your system up to a month. Cocaine, heroin, 2 to 5 days. So if you think about this situation, and God, I know too much about this because I had too many weed smoking friends and teammates. They know how to cycle in and cycle out. And that's why they always say, don't get caught or don't do it at all. That's the tough one about this, the emotional pull because of her loss.
Let's stay with the emotional pull, because of her grieving a tremendous loss, a loss that some people have had to deal with in life, and if you haven't yet, you will have to eventually, but we all have to deal with tough things in life, so I'm not going to weigh one against another. But because of her grieving, I'm reminded of this. You don't make rules based upon exceptions. You make rules based upon the norm.
Yes.
If you're driving to the hospital and you're with your significant other, say you're with your spouse, with your girlfriend, whatever the case may be, and her water breaks, got to get to a hospital ASAP. So you run a red light.
Yeah.
Well, we can't now remove all red lights in the nation because your running of the red light was actually very justified in the instance.
Yeah.
You actually have to have a rule based upon a norm, not an exception. But also, rules aren't necessarily in place just to protect you. Most rules are actually in place to protect other people. I recently said this on Twitter, but I'll say it on the show. You can say it's cool to legalize weed in competition while you're running in a straight line, but it's probably not great to legalize weed in competition if you're throwing a javelin. It's probably not great to legalize weed in competition if you're using a pole to elevate over a pole 18 feet high, the pole vault. It's probably not great or safe to legalize weed in competition if you're throwing a discus, spinning around, and then heaving an object roughly 180 to 250 feet through the air with people, referees and whatnot, marking the distance. It's probably not a great idea. We have rules for the norm, not rules for the exception. So while this might be a merit-based exception, if you will, you don't make a rule based upon an exception.
No, you don't. And that's what's unfortunate about this
Right.
situation.
Terry, I think we had quite a bit from Wiley and Nacho. Very intellectual discussion there regarding that, and very, eloquent, fluent, as you would say, knowledgeable about the issue. But as they said, while they acknowledge all that she said and that she accepted responsibility, and also putting it in context, as they say, what they call it, stupid rules, you have to abide by the rules because they are the rules. Okay.
Well, I think the biggest one for me there, I don't always agree with Marcellus Wiley, but the whereabouts rule is, the fact that there's 3 strikes, the missing 1 test, missing 2 tests, missing 3 tests in the space of 12 months. So especially when you already know that you're on that threshold, you already know that you've missed 2. And if you're an elite athlete, you're a world-class athlete getting ready to compete at the global level. The fact of missing 3 tests is a bit much. The other issue that really struck me when Ashley talks about the concept, and there's been some conversation about that, the concept that the ban that the young lady is facing is racially motivated. The fact is that part of the reason that marijuana is on the WADA list is because it is deemed to be and let me just get the exact thing here for you. It violates the spirit of sport. So that is one of the 3 markers that must be fulfilled in order for it to be on the prohibited list. And the fact that marijuana is deemed socially unacceptable or violating the spirit of sport and has been illegal for such a long time has its roots in racism and has racial roots. So that's a separate conversation that can be picked up elsewhere. But in this specific instance, again, the young lady has accepted responsibility and has taken full accountability. So the rule is the rule. She knew the rule. She violated it, and she was missing the Olympics. The idea, though, and again, this is a very American thing, that missing the Olympics is a big thing, but it is not the be-all and end-all. The idea that it is, everything is simply not true. She's going to continue to have a very successful, hopefully, professional career. She's run one of the 10 fastest times in the world this year. Ever. This year, she has run one of the 10 fastest times in the world ever. She should have a very, very successful career. She's been an NCAA champion, has been a world under 20 record holder. She should go on from strength to strength, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of Sha'Carri Richardson in the future. Not just that, and she's only 21 years old. She's got, to God willing, she's got years ahead of her in the sport. Next year, World Championships will be in Oregon. Hopefully, we'll be seeing her there on home soil, and we'll be seeing her going forward at the Olympics down the road. So, yeah, it's a big deal that she's missed the Olympics this year, but this is really prisoner of the moment stuff from the U.S. commentators who only really follow athletics by and large, as we've alluded to previously in the show, only really follow athletics once every 4 years, or for a very brief window every 4 years. So she's hopefully going to be okay and is going to have a long career ahead of her.
Well, Well, one person who I know that have been following the Olympics for quite a while is Harvey Glantz. Let me see, Harvey. Harvey, are you there with us? No, I think he's having some connection issue. Let me see. We'll try to see if we can get back to him shortly. Are you hearing us, Harvey? No, he's reconnecting. Well, I'll try to regain connection with Harvey Glantz because he is in Stockholm. As you know, the Stockholm Diamond League will be what we call the Stockholm Wanda Diamond League will continue on this weekend, July 4th, in Stockholm at the Stockholm Olympic Stadium. And, Kirani will be up in the 400 meters as well as a number of other Caribbean athletes. I almost said Caribbean Olympians. Well, those who have, some of them are Olympians themselves, Kerry, and there are those who are competing.
Well, the Olympic champion is going to be in action, the reigning Olympic champion in the javelin throw. The world champion, sorry.
The world champion, the world champion.
In action, and a former Olympic champion in Keyshawn Walker.
Keyshawn Walker.
Looking forward to seeing those guys and what they're going to do. In a very strong year for the javelin, huh?
Yeah, and interesting enough that not just strong year for the javelin, but they had so many competitions, almost every week or every 2 weeks to some extent. There's some level of competition for the javelin throwers. Normally you don't get that many competitions, and I don't know if because they are based in Europe, that they have been able to participate in so many competitions. Back in the Caribbean, we don't have that many competitions, especially in the field events as javelin. So Keyshawn and Anderson in particular have been able to compete in at least probably 5-6 javelin events they may get into probably before the Olympic Games. But it's good to know that they are getting that. While we are at that, Terry, for the past week, we have been hearing and seeing and noting to some extent the composition of teams for the Olympic Games. What you can tell me for St. Lucia?
Well, with St. Lucia in athletics is going to be represented by Laverne Spencer, who was made it on the list as by virtue of her ranking. We have 2 sailors and 2 swimmers. We have our first repeat sailor in the Olympics. So we have two competitors who will be going back or returning Olympians. Stephanie de Bolavella is going back in the women's laser radial. First time, I think it's actually, I think the first time outside of athletics that St. Lucia has had a repeat Olympian. All of our swimmers have been one and done. All of our sailors have been one and done. And most of, in fact, of our track and field athletes have been one and done. So it's the first time that we will have a repeat Olympian outside of athletics and outside of Laverne Spencer and Dominic Johnson. So that's what we're looking at. I think most of the Eastern Caribbean territories are looking at like 4 and 5 member teams, 4 and 5, maybe 6 member teams. So fairly small teams coming from this region, but hoping for big things.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting scenario there for the Caribbean. You recall Arthur Bolden in the interview on this program said, I think it was in May or somewhere in April, late April, said that from his vantage point at the time, that the Caribbean seems to be here in terms of Olympic medal hauls, and he's zooming specifically on the men's sprinting to an extent, because that was an area where we noted quite a number of Caribbean athletes qualifying in the sprinting in particular, albeit the Jamaicans leading it with the likes of Usain Bolt and Johan Blake and Asafa Powell. That hasn't been the case. That obviously the as we say, the guards changed, and it seemed as if the Caribbean not really expecting that much from the men in terms of sprinting, and the focus will be on the women, Terry, in
Well,
leading that
absolutely.
charge.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the Jamaican trio, Jackson really stepping up, having stepped down in distance, and she's really showing her mettle as a 100-meter runner. Doing tremendous things this year, running one of the fastest times in the world ever in 100 meters. The Shelly Ann, obviously, Fraser Price, Michelle Yai coming back. You have obviously from the Bahamas. You have Mrs. Weibo coming to the fore once again, and a previous Olympic champion. So there's going to be some intrigue in the men's 400. There's going to be some interest from the Caribbean, certainly with Dion Lendor, Namasha Cedeno, and of course your very own Kirani James being very much in the mix. I think that's going to actually be one of the more interesting, as it has been for probably the last Olympic cycle at least, has been one of the more interesting events in the world athletics. The other one that we really have to look out for is the 400-meter hurdles, where there's going to be, I think, a ding-dong battle between Warhol and Rai Benjamin, with a number of other athletes wanting to put their names on that list as well. So I think that one's going to be really, really interesting. And then the 400 women is also 400 hurdles women is going to be very interesting as well. There's going to be some Caribbean interest in there. Rai, although obviously he competes for the United States, does have that Caribbean rooting interest, his father being a former West Indies fast bowler, Winston Benjamin, so coming from Antigua and Barbuda, does have that background, so it's certainly somebody that we'll be looking at very closely. But there's still a lot of rooting interest for the Caribbean. As I mentioned, the javelin throw, we haven't, I think, seen the best of the Jamaican discus throwers, men's discus throwers just yet. But we'll be looking out for them. A lot of horizontal jumpers from the Caribbean making the Olympic standard. Malone from the BBI, Lafon from Dominica, Gittins from Trinidad and Tobago. There's a group of them from Jamaica as well. So there's still a lot to watch for from a Caribbean perspective at Tokyo 2020.
Okay then. Let me see if we can get through to Javi Glantz. Are you there? Let me see. Javi, are you there? I think I'm hearing a sort of echo, so I'm getting the impression that he's somewhere there. Javi, are you hearing us? Let me see. Okay, well, seems as if he's still having a little buffering or connection from his end. But
as I mentioned earlier, I actually had a similar issue. I wasn't hearing you for a little while.
Okay, so I think we may be having just a little buffering on his side, and he probably may get through to us shortly. Yeah. But well, I hope shortly. But I wanted to bring in Javi on the conversation here, but he's still having that problem. Terry, while we wait on Javi, you saw the results of some of the games played in the Gold Cup, CONCACAF Gold Cup qualifiers for it was Barbados versus Bermuda. Trinidad and Tobago.
8-1, was it?
Yeah, I think it's 8-1. Trinidad and Tobago came up against Montserrat, and then we had Haiti versus St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Haiti defeated St. Vincent and the Grenadines 6-1. Bermuda defeated Barbados 8-1, and Trinidad and Tobago defeated Montserrat 6-1. Very high scoring, game.
A friend of mine was posting that she was looking for 5 goals. She got 6. Trinidadian friend of mine.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Well, so it appears that the that's the preliminary round of the of that qualifying for the Gold Cup tournament. Grenada is already into the Gold Cup tournament, and I think they're already the last batch of footballers should be leaving this weekend or should be leaving Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. Probably the UK-based players may be leaving on Sunday to link up with a team in Dallas or somewhere there. So that is coming up for attention in the football, right? And then we have the final T20 International between West Indies and South Africa at the National Stadium in St. George's today, Saturday. It will be a cliffhanger because the winner takes it all. The series tied 2 apiece, and it's the fifth and final. And no doubt West Indies looking at least to win the series. Interesting enough that with all the rain that fell and the flooding around the stadium, if you see the video and pictures of the flooding around the stadium on Friday, you would be questioning whether or not there would be a game on today. Well, strange enough, from what I've heard, is that nothing really had happened to the field, at the cricket stadium in particular, the field, just some flooding on the lower level of the stadium. But other than that, the field was okay, and they should expect a prompt start. From what I heard, they should expect a prompt start. Well, that's what I heard this morning, hoping that remains the same and that we can look forward to that cricket game. Then on to
the game underway. Bavuma is out already.
Okay, right.
So 1-1, South Africa right now.
South Africa, and then there's also the West Indies
making a strong start.
Right, and then there's the West Indies women playing Pakistan women in Antigua. That's also going concurrently.
Pakistan A, and then the West Indies have the senior team and the A team.
Right, and I think the A team will play first. There will always be a double header. The A team will play, and then the other team will play after. So lots of sporting action, especially cricket, I should say. And it seems to be a quiet weekend for track and field in the Caribbean. Albeit there's the Diamond League and some other events. Then I was told that Nasio John from Grenada, he represented Grenada at the Carifta Games before, and he was looking to qualify for the World Under-20 Championship in Nigeria. And that he posted a qualifying time. He's only he's just 17 or 18, I think. And he had a qualifying time of 10.3. Let me just get the correct time in there. He ran, that was yesterday in Oregon, as a matter of fact. He finished third in 10.33 seconds. Win reading of 1.9. So it's illegal in Oregon, boys 100 meters dash in the Odo Nationals, right? So Nasio John seems as if he has qualified for, well, hopefully he's qualified for the World Under-20 Championship. And without the Carifta Games, I am certain that the kids are looking forward to some level of representation for their countries. And the World Under-20 Championship is one that they're looking to qualify for, and hopefully that he gets to represent. Are you aware of anyone else, Terry, or how the Caribbean is looking for representation in the Under-20 Championships, knowing for a fact that there wasn't any Carifta Games?
Yeah, I'm not off the top of my head. It's not something I've looked at very closely. There is, of course, the NACAC and the 18 and the 23 coming up in a couple of weeks. In fact, I think next week, NACAC and the 18 and the 23 championships are taking place. Unfortunately, again, because of the pandemic, a number of difficulties, a number of challenges for for federations, for athletes in terms of being able to make their way there. I know that for Nairobi, the last time Nairobi had this meet in 2017, or was it no? It was, I think it was the last NACA. It was the last World Under 18 Championships, which they had at that time, and there were a number of federations who were very skeptical. The US did not participate. Great Britain did not participate. A number of federations did not take part in the World Under 18. So still, and especially now with the pandemic, a lot of complications for federations in terms of being able to find opportunities for athletes to go out there and represent, especially junior athletes.
Yeah, well, that's what folks were expecting, and it's likely that we will get some of these athletes to participate, whether it's in NACAC or any other junior.
Now I'm really
okay. I think we hear Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm hearing you loud and clear. Right. So I'm saying that it's most likely that some of these athletes will get some level of competition before or get the opportunity to qualify for the World Under 20 Championships. I think they're really looking forward to participating, qualifying. Well, just to correct you, Nazio is actually 18 years. I just see his, he's 18, right? And as Miss Dennis Williams is telling me too, that he has qualified. So it's congratulations to Nazio, and I really hope that he'll be able to represent Grenada. He's a very positive youth, very committed, very focused, and takes his training serious. And he, at 18 years, 10.3 seconds, and I know he can go faster than that in competition. I think he bears the future for Grenada in terms of sprinting. We haven't had sprinters in that sort of category in a very long time, albeit Sean Lambert, I think, way back then. But at 18 years, doing 10.3 with good coaching. And
Sean sound old, man.
Hey?
Sean sound old. Sean not way back.
Oh, well, I mean, when I say way back, I mean Sean has left sprinting quite a while now. You know?
Yeah. His career was about 10, 12 years old.
Well, and by the way, we should say Dr. Sean Lambert, because he is,
There you go.
Yeah, he's a medical doctor now, Dr. Sean Lambert. But, I think when we see talent at a very young age, it's encouraging. Albeit sometimes we have a number of sprinters. I mean, Terry, you would have covered numerous character games like myself, and would have seen so many of these young sprinters coming out, giving us impressive timings. Albeit some way or the other, they would have just, fell through the cracks. Whether it was Jamaica, Cayman Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, we recall these sprinters, top sprinters, 10-3, 10-2, 10-1, giving us these impressive times. And we say future looks bright for the Caribbean in terms of sprinting. And somewhere along the line, these guys fell through. I'm certain you can now think back, Terry, at some of those names.
Yeah, Jamaica has had a wealth of guys who've come through over the years at the junior level and haven't advanced. I mean, most recently, Oblique Seville has kind of fallen off. We've seen all kind of names throughout the years who've come through at the junior level and who have run really fast times, run world-leading times, all sorts of things, and they just haven't emerged at the next level of competition. So it's especially for us smaller territories, it's always a struggle. It's always a challenge to be able to put athletes in the best possible position, even when they start to emerge and start demonstrating their talent. It's always a challenge for us, more so than the bigger territories and the wealthier territories. Because first you have to surround them with the right people. You have to put them in the right coaching situation and so on. But you also have to instill the right mentality in them. And you talk about Nazio, whom I remember as you say, a really positive youth. You have to give them that sense of belief and that sense of understanding that they are competing and can compete amongst the world's best, not just at the junior level, but that they can push on and what are elements that they need in order to really develop that mindset and to be able to understand their place in the scheme of their potential place and in the scheme of things and what it is that they can truly achieve. Um, it's often the case that we look at these youngsters and we see where they are as opposed to seeing where they could and should be 5 years and 10 years down the road, and how do we chart the pathway between where they are now and what it is that they can achieve or what we expect them to achieve. So a lot of the times we get besotted with, hey, this kid is really amazing, he's 17 years old, he's out of this world, and we don't take the time to really appreciate, hey, this guy has a lot of potential, he's done something great, but let us not spend too much time celebrating that. We celebrate it, but we can't get caught up in we celebrate that and then we just ignore what it takes to get to the next level.
Yeah, well, that's so much the case that has been happening. But it's also good, Terry, that we had some athletes who have been representing their countries, their respective islands, have been doing that religiously, patriotically over the years. And I can turn to a point to Levin Spencer, for example, from St. Lucia, as one who has been since at, in college, for example, and to me, she's a veteran in the sport, because she has been there through thick and thin, representing St. Lucia over the years. And likewise, as we have the Karani and the Kurt Felix is another one, for example, who have been there, and some of them have been representing their country since at the Carifta Games, CUT games, for example. That's the junior championship. All these things, and they have moved up and consistently representing their country, their islands, respectively, over the years. Even as Olympians, going through all sorts of trials and tribulations, and always making themselves available to represent. That has been the case for a number of our athletes until probably retirement.
Yeah, but I think I made the point on the last show when I was on here that it's really, for me, it's really a case that our federations, our small territories, we don't really have the resource. We're not resource rich. We don't have a ton of money. We don't have facilities. We don't have as many, highly qualified coaches. We don't have a level of competition internally. Certainly, that you want to the concept that iron sharpens iron, to me, always holds true in sport. And if you're not surrounded by people who are performing at a high level, it's that much more difficult for you to pick yourself up. And so it's always important for me to look at what we do to maximize our opportunities, to maximize the potential of the few athletes that we have coming out, and to try to keep as many of those athletes in the sport as possible. I mean, St. Lucia, you look at where we are, Albert Reynolds 2 years away from competing at the World Championships, and he's fallen short this year, unfortunately, of being able to compete at the Olympics. Janelle Shaper, unfortunately, she had an injury, as did Julian Alfred. But those are young ladies that, again, we want to be able to continue to support, and we want to be able to have a seat with those and say, hey, what do you need? As for instance, Kirani would have done. Kirani, a lot of people were counting Kirani out, essentially. And he got injured. He's come back. He's certainly stamped his name amongst the best in the world once again. And how do you successfully chart a way back? And that is never something that the athlete can do just on his or her own. It has to be something that you do with the cooperation and support of your federation, your government, your team, your sponsors. A team always takes you further. The whole African proverb Ubuntu. You go further together. If you want to travel fast, you travel alone. If you want to travel far, you travel with people. And if you want to go far, you have to have that team behind you. And if we want to maximize our numbers, we want to maximize the ability and potential of each individual who makes up our fraternity, our athletics fraternity, our sporting fraternity. It's important that our federations, that our coaches, that our governments are working together and in concert in order to really put the right frameworks and the right structures in place. We've seen that obviously bearing fruit in Grenada, probably first and foremost amongst the AETS. You've seen it obviously in Jamaica, where they have a tremendous structure, the Bahamas, and those are the kind of examples that we have to follow as far as being able to surround our athletes with the right people and with the right programs in order to take them to the highest heights.
Yeah, well, the issue of resources, Terry, will always come up, will always be debated, and I think you may have touched on that in the last program when we asked the whole issue of whether or not regional governments are in a position, Terry, in the post-pandemic period, and I keep asking that to other folks. I think I asked it to Atto and others, in a position to provide funding in whatever form or continue the funding pre-pandemic in light of the challenges faced, the health sector, the education sector, in light of the lack of, revenues in some areas, because they have given up quite a lot during the pandemic, whether or not sports will have to bite the dust.
I'm not an economist, so I couldn't balance everything that a government needs to balance and everything that needs to be looked at in terms of expenditure. But I do know that sport has long-term benefit. I do know that sport is a long-term investment, and that sport for all, that fitness plays a role in terms of national development, economic development, productivity, the health sector, reducing the burden on the health sector, you name it, there are benefits to be derived from sport. The issue is that a lot of those benefits are not short-term benefits, and that if you invest in a group of 40 to 50, under 16 cricketers now, you're not going to see the benefits. You're not going to see immediate returns on your investment. And of course, our election cycles most times are 5 years. If you invest in those under 15, under 16 cricketers now, you are probably going to reap the bulk of the benefits when they are in their mid-20s. So those guys are, if you make the right investments, those guys are going to be guys who are going to go out there and earn. Those are going to be guys who are going to be able to make their living off the game, who are going to be able to pass on and grow the game domestically, who are going to be able to garner success for you going down the road. Same for athletics, same for football, same for, you name it, swimming. You put that investment, you put some of that investment in infrastructure, but you put the bulk of the investment in the programming, in coaching, in development of those young people, whether it be things like facilitating transport for them, nutrition, getting supplements and so on, equipment. But that is where your investment has to be if you want to have long-term success. Again, this is I think, to me, a question of whether you doing a road now puts people to work. Building a building, building a structure now puts people to work. It puts people to work today. But what does it mean in terms of 10 years or 10 months even from now? You've built a structure now, and yes, you're putting these people to work right away. But what's going to happen to them in a year or 2 years? As opposed to putting an investment in young athletes who are going to be able to go to college, get themselves degrees. If they are of a certain standard, they're going to be able to get scholarships. They're going to get scholarships that are going to be worth a $250,000 EC dollars. So $100,000 are going to be put into those athletes by somebody who is not the local taxpayer. So you're reaping $100,000 worth of benefit beyond the fact, and that's not beyond that. That's even before you look at the fact that you're going to be getting world-class training, you're going to be getting access to facilities and so on. So I think those are the things that have to be taken into account when you even ask, is the money there? There's always money. There's always money, but too often we misplace our investment in sport. We spend money on lighting, on infrastructure, and we don't put enough money in programming and in long-term development. And sometimes we see politicians handing uniforms. I hate to see a politician giving a team a set of uniforms when I know that team has kids on it who have not had a meal for the day. Those kids may not have any knowledge of the basics of the sport because they don't necessarily have the coaching. They don't know where the next competitive opportunities are, but they've got a nice new uniform. Or you do the most cosmetic things. And these are places where, yes, we put money, but where are we putting the money? And are we using the money wisely? So I think a lot of the interventions that we talk about, is there money? Yes, there's money. Yes, there is money. It's just a question of how wisely are we using the money and what is the long-term versus the short-term benefit of putting that investment and using those resources wisely.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like you, I may not have said it like you, but I do have that concern as well regarding, how the politicians play into sport. And all the nice talks, they come with all this. And something I always talk about, how committed they are to development. I mean, listen, there are times, Terry, I can hear a politician speaking and I probably can say word for word what they will be saying. Verbatim. I almost know the script because after all these years, I know the lines, how committed and dedicated and, the words are there. Okay, I can, it's almost like a generic
investment, and we're going to develop champions.
Right, the investment, yeah.
Champions are going to come from this sport. And we're building a court, and the court is just going to spring up champions.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. Is like, as you say, the stadium, the facility, the infrastructure. That's one aspect of it. But if you don't develop the other aspect, then that will just stay like that, Just to add what Alana John is saying, Alana actually is the mother of Nazio John. Well said, Mr. Finester. Nazio has a very strong support group, and I wish other kids can get the kind of support he has. We never look at where he is at the present moment. We always look at the future. Well said. I think that's very, well written in terms of just not looking at where he is now, but looking at where he's going or where he can go, And I think that is how the parents should be thinking. And one of the things I realized about Nazio, and the mom spoke about the support group, is the support group is basically the parents also part of that support group, mother and father part of the support group, which I think is lacking a lot in some of the sports in the Caribbean, especially track and field. When you look at tennis, especially at the youth level, and you will know that, Terry, in St. Lucia, when you look at swimming, again, in St. Lucia, you know how much the parents are involved. The swimmers and the young tennis players do not travel without the parents. The parents make that level of investment, you know, albeit sometimes, it may be difficult to some extent in some other sporting disciplines, depending on. You know that in track and field, when it comes to the Bahamas, for example,
Oh, yeah.
the Bahamas travel with what they call the support group. There is an extra, well, it's two planes, as you know, traditionally two planes, one for the athletes and officials, and the other one for the spectators. They start planning in advance.
And a section of the plane for the cowbells.
For the cowbells and the band and thing like that. So
The drums.
all of that. So it comes with and it goes back to Alana's point in terms of that support. It's important that parents be part of that. That support group, and also encouraging that support group, because it helps in the development of the athlete. And I say athlete, not referring just to track and field, but overall, whether it's swimming, tennis, football, basketball, whatever, parents need to be part of that, appreciate the sacrifice those kids are making. I, for example, see you will go on an average weekday afternoon or weekend in particular, and I will use New York City as an example, where you will see the large crowd, and you wondering what is taking place there. And parents and the kids are just playing five-a-side and running up and enjoying themselves. Yes, there's some aspect of coaching, but there's also the competition. And you will see so many of these parents, their family members there to support and to encourage. And Terry, I think is something we're lacking in the Caribbean, and I'm saying that because I've seen in some of the islands where the kids are there, and there are certain sports, as we mentioned, the tennis and swimming and things like that, so exception. But football, and you see the kids are just there, and no, mom is not there, dad is not there, sister, no one is there. There's not that level of sacrifice, because mom has to go probably to Saturday market. Dad has to probably go to the barber. They find some excuse to go somewhere. And I'm not saying every time you have to, but sometimes you have to make that sacrifice there.
Well, first of all, I look forward to seeing that, seeing the joint family debate that's making the flag at the future Olympics going forward. Wishing Nazi all the best as he continues his career. But to be fair, there is a level of economic stratification in some of these sports, and there's also a question and a culture. And if that culture is not being supported, the future of the country will not get that the support that you desire. There is, by and large, tennis, um, by and large, and not exclusively, but a lot of the athletes who are involved in those sports come from a different socioeconomic bracket than some of those who are involved in track and field. Track and field, you will find more of the basically struggling with the hand to mouth, as opposed to tennis, where you will have those individuals. And part of it, again, is equipment, access to fees, and this kind of things. Um, those issues are very real issues for some of the families who are involved in athletics. In some cases, of course, there is more that could be done. But again, it does require the partners, I think, the federation and the national governments. So, I mean, you look at the divide, for instance, between Jamaica and their return to sport as compared to most of us in the Eastern Caribbean. You look at the divide between the US and their return to sport, Europe and their return
it comes down to just our real economic power, and part of it comes down to our inability or unwillingness to make certain decisions and prioritize certain things, and to be able to contextualize and put the right surrounding environment to enable to receive high-level track activities in place across the globe. But in the Caribbean, talking about the pandemic, from the beginning of the pandemic, it was that islands best able to handle the pandemic, and yet you see full crowd, watching of low elsewhere or going to NCAA, they have big crowds. You're seeing all of these things happening around the world, and there's you sit back and say, but wait a minute, are we necessarily putting ourselves for success? Are we doing the right things? Are we ready? Do we really care about lift our
Yeah, well, that is where, if ever the political will, as we talk about, if politicians need to get involved in sports, they need to understand, a number of things. And as you said, not just the token representation and the cosmetic presentations, especially when it comes close to an election, and the involvement probably just to get the votes. They believe that they have to sponsor a competition, and as you say, handing over of uniforms and things like that. So, but the real investment in sports, okay, real investment, and investment, as you said, can take many forms. Handing over a pair of uniform to a child who doesn't know where he gets the next meal from, doesn't say much, it doesn't say much. It's just, for the politician, a photo op, to show that, I've made that donation, and then about a week or so after, a few days after, the hell with this child, doesn't really find out how the child is going, how the child is doing or whatever. And in some instances, the politicians are the first set of people to, be on the airport, to greet them when they return, as if that says all, and things like that. Where is the real investment in sports? The real investment I'm talking about, not just investment. As you say, building a stadium, lighting a field, it's only part of the investment in sports. That's the infrastructure. But if you don't invest in the human capital, in the development of this athlete or so, then the facility comes out, it comes down to naught. It will just be there, but no one will be able to participate in it or compete in it, For example, and I'm not saying that there hasn't been investment in terms of Grenada, but could you imagine that you have a stadium as the Kirani James Athletic Stadium in Grenada, and you don't have quality athletes to compete? Could you imagine something like that? And you have to make an investment in the development of the athletes, whether it's cricketers, whether it's footballers, whether it's netballers, wherever it is. You have to make that level of investment. And I think it's something in some of the islands, albeit we see in places like Jamaica, for example, there's serious investment, even though sometimes you hear whether it's the JFF or others still clamoring for more. But I am certain places like St. Lucia and Grenada and others will say, we wish we probably was in a situation like that, because they actually have budget, they have all sorts of funding, all sorts of structures in place to support the development of sports, to ensure representation at the highest level. That's why, for example, the Jamaicans are represented in so many sporting events. because of that level of investment. And I wish, Terry, that sometimes our politicians in the islands and in the sub-region in particular can just think outside of the box and think about the possibilities. I'm hearing, Terry, in some instances, by the way, that a sports minister, except that sports minister has some other major portfolio, doesn't really have a big voice in cabinet. Except sports is twinned with some other major, other ministry. Sports doesn't have a major say in cabinet, finance, health, economics, the economy, these sorts of ministers will have big say, will have a lot of talking to do.
And part of that is because, again, like I said earlier, I mean, sport is not something that's put the students start getting start by
Terry, I'm just losing your audio a bit in and out. I'm just losing the audio. Let's hear now. Yeah.
Okay. Not sure what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something that pays off immediately. And there are opportunities down the road. There are things that you can do. So I mean, there are economic benefits. There are health benefits. So there are a number, the youth development, obviously. There are a number of portfolios that you could say, let me twin national development, let me twin sport with. And there are a number of parallel goals that sport enjoys along with some of those other portfolios in the cabinet. But all too often, I would say, I mean, I read, I think it was about 2 years ago, a former cabinet member in St. Lucia saying that back in the 70s when they were approaching independence, sport was just a low priority. And for them, they just did not see. And he wrote this. And he says, for when they were approaching independence, they did not see the value and the importance of investing in sport. As far as they were concerned, it was a recreation, it was a pastime, and they did not give it much attention. So there you have it. And that plants a seed which carries over 40 something years later.
Yeah. Well, that is the thing about it. Unless they don't understand the importance, and it's sort of strange, Terry, that after all these years, it's almost as if you're trying to convert people. This should be sort of easy in terms of knowing the value of sports, or what the contribution sports have made to some of those countries. Learning best practices from some of these countries. Look what sports have done to Jamaica, albeit the Usain Bolt phenomena, and things like that. So, but look what it has done and what it continues to do. When you talk track and field, there isn't a conversation about track and field without at least the name Jamaica being mentioned. Okay, and even with Bolt out of track and field, his legacy and even those who are following still continuing to put Jamaica or give Jamaica that level of admiration, attention, and things like that. So that to me is a lot in terms of probably tourism, etc., like that. So I mean, you can. Well, there isn't a budget for that sort of recognition.
Even before you look at Bolt, what Bolt did was transcend athletics. But
right.
Even before you looked at Usain Bolt, Jamaica had always been for a reason. Soccer power, Jamaica had always been in that athletic competition. Track and field people. But Bolt transcended that. Not just thinking that above man. It's bigger than just his impact of to see. So that that kind of singular figure really takes you to another realm. It takes you to another plateau. But you look at Grenada, and you look at what some of your athletes have done, and of course, like it is really indeed transformative and really makes a massive difference.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the conversation will continue regarding the sports and the sort of investment that we expect the governments to make. Not that the you know private sector cannot provide support, which we hope that they will and continue to provide support. But I think government is a very critical partner in this, and especially as it relates to setting policies as well, okay, and ensuring that we reap the benefits from that. While we're on that, Terry, there was an interesting discussion that came up sometime last week, and I recall someone called me to discuss that scenario because social media has given people so many, well, the opportunity really to comment, to react, to provide feedback, and albeit sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of false information. And it had to do with whether or not the government can intervene in the affairs of a national sporting association. So let's say the St. Lucia Football Association has issues and have their own internal squabbles and whatever it is. And whether the Ministry of Sport in St. Lucia can intervene, disband the St. Lucia Football Association and put up their own committee or whatever it is like that. So, and someone I recall called me and they asked me what I know about that, and they were saying that they were trying to explain to that discussion at the time that no, it cannot. These international sporting associations, do not allow governments to intervene. And there are the examples like in Africa where a number sometimes of these associations are suspended, okay, because of they call it political intervention and things like that. And I'm saying that to say, Terry, that the conversation in the discussion at that time was such that these folks was adamant that the government should intervene. The government has the right to intervene. And the person was telling them, hey, no. It's the belief that they should, but if they do, and which they could, here are the consequences. And, it just shows you sometimes, Terry, that the not so much misinformation, but the lack of information sometimes for the average person in terms of knowing how sports is governed, international sports particularly governed. And sometimes they believe that government should get involved in just about everything. And I'm certain you're aware, Terry, that governments do not and cannot just intervene in international sporting administration.
We had an interesting situation about 12, 15 years ago in St. Lucia where the Basketball Federation had essentially ceased to operate. And a group of stakeholders approached the vendors and said, hey, basketball back because there was nothing happening, there was no training, no development, no competition taking place outside of those schools. And the government, the then Ministry of Sports, put in a stakeholder committee, which ran the affairs of basketball for about 5 years. The basketball went through a little bit of a period, but essentially, government did work against sport for a little while with the approval and the
Right.
notification of the stakeholders. But what I think we're facing sometimes, Matt, and we've seen it recently in terms of sharing football, we've seen it, I think, in the case of
Yeah.
basketball, boxing,
Boxing. Yeah.
is that people only really get interested in the affairs of a sport,
Mhm.
the affairs of governance, the affairs of federation. By and large, the regular man on the street, the Joe Blow, the citizen, only really gets interested when there's controversy.
Mhm.
When there's controversy, they're up in arms. It's the worst thing ever. You know, how could this be allowed to go on?
On. Yeah.
Who put these guys there? Government needs to step in. And it's a failure to appreciate the failure to really take on board the way things operate in
Mhm.
the real world. And as you say, I think by and large, just will not be allowed to take over the national federation anytime. And, unfortunately, we don't have a populace that is sufficiently, so when we talk about governments and the government and so on, that has to be led to some extent. Yeah, we've seen governments, we've seen politicians doing their own thing, but a lot of the time, they will do things that are deemed to be notable popular. So if it were popular, for instance, just for argument's sake, if it were popular to have development programs for under 15 or under 12 or even primary school students, more than likely we would see an investment in them.
Mhm.
But we don't see people out there supporting our youth. We don't see the support at youth competitions. So consequently, when it comes down to cabinet, we don't get that kind of support. We don't get that kind of support from the corporate sector because again, those people in the corporate sector, they're trying to sell their product. And if you're trying to sell your product, you want to be associated with things that have a lot of numbers behind them. If you see consumers going to swimming, and you don't see consumers at youth cricket, guess where you're going to put your money? You know, if you see a lot of people, if you look and see a big crowd at youth football, and you don't see a big crowd at youth track and field, guess where you're going to put your money? So, in a lot of cases, people talk, and they talk with their mouth, but they don't talk with their feet. They don't let their dollars do the talking. They don't put action. They don't get involved in their youth. And I always ask, Mike, one of the things people often want to talk about is they want to talk about governance at the national level, but they don't necessarily look at what is happening at the club level, at the affiliate level, and are those affiliates well governed? Do those affiliates have the resources that they need in terms of human resource? People who are trained in finance, people who are trained in leadership, people who are trained in public relations. Do they have those kinds of competencies at the basic level in order to allow them to filter up to the national level? So if a national
Right.
federation isn't working, if the Olympic Committee is working, it may be that those people are not involved at the bottom. And
So.
expecting you to just come out of the blue and say, hey, boy, I should run for I should run for presidency of the National Federation when you've never been involved. And my signal example of that, unfortunately, I love it, but unfortunately, my signal example of that has always been Viv Richards. Viv Richards came out one day and said he wanted to be coach of the West Indies team. And I said, but okay, I love you, Sir Viv. You're wonderful. You're a great cricketer. But where are your coaching bona fides? Have you coached at the village level? Have you coached at the district level? Have you coached at the club level? Have you even coached at national level? So if you haven't coached at any of those levels, just expecting you to just walk in and say, hey, you know, I want to coach at the highest level is unfair to you. It's unfair to the other coaches who might be vying for the position, and it's certainly unfair to the sport and to the guys who are out there plying their trade. You know, similarly, just expecting you to just step in as president of a national federation when you have not been paying your dues, you've not been doing the due diligence, you've not been doing the work, you've not been developing yourself, developing your craft at the lower levels, is just pointless and you know, it speaks a lack of culture, and it speaks a lack of development beyond just being able to plug people into position.
Yeah, because I, for example, I always think that the weakness of the Olympic committees, it's a reflection of the state of sports administration in the various, territories. And as you indicated, if we do not have strong club structure, which will feed into national associations. So whether it's a football or track and field or basketball clubs, whatever it is, proper club structure, that can feed into the national association, whether it's the football, the basketball, the netball, etc., and in turn can feed into the National Olympic Committee, So if you do not have that from the bottom there, then that will be a reflection of what you will get at the top. Mm-hmm. And I say that too because there's a guy who, and that can probably spread out in a lot of things, because there's a guy who lives in New York, and I can call his name because I always, speak to him privately about it, but I say I always have to mention it. His name is Wilbur Thomas, and a former national basketballer, represented Grenada, etc. Went off scholarship, did very well. It's college, whatever. Has a very good job, I should say, in terms of recruiting, etc. And as part of his contribution, he decides that, listen, in the summer, instead of staying in New York, I can go to Grenada and provide a summer camp, provide the opportunities for, young kids, etc. And Terry, since he started this in terms of noble idea, the amount of obstacles and challenges he encountered, at one point in time, I recall that he was almost planning to give up. But because he said, listen, it's not about me, it's about what I see in the future, what I see about those kids, that he persevered, okay? And albeit, because of the COVID, he's not having a camp this year. And basically all he is really was asking for is the support, is really the support, because in terms of funding and all these things, he is getting all this, the logistics and all these things, and, bringing it to Grenada. So he just needs the support, one, from the local associations, especially basketball as a basketballer, and two, from the Ministry of Sports / government support, Listen, this is something, whether it's basketball, track and field, whatever you see it, discuss it with him. You see the merit, you see the what he's really trying to get at, etc. And all you need to do is provide support, because that is what you want. You want that sort of, that sort of collaboration. You want that sort of working relationship with people like that, folks who are really planning to give back. They got an opportunity. They were able to go overseas, study, and they want to make a contribution. So they are finding various ways of making that contribution, and you should not be putting obstacles and creating challenges for these guys. I mean, and in some instances, are guys that you would have played with. I'm talking about folks on these associations who would have played with them and, understand what it is, and not support him, And I'm certain, Terry, these are some of the challenges that others are facing in some of the islands as well.
Yeah, and Mike, as we get ready to close out this afternoon, you're absolutely right. And sometimes it is really about where the idea comes from or who originates the idea
Yeah.
or what the idea is. I mean, you might have something that's the like manna from heaven, but if the manna from heaven doesn't come from the right source, from the right place, from somebody who is connected in the right way, um, it's just discarded. I remember hearing about programs in America and elsewhere where they sounded like great ideas. Yeah, obviously, you might need a little bit of interrogation, a little bit of fleshing out, and kids and this. But they would essentially would just been rejected out of hand. And so part of it is about where it comes from, which is important because ego should not be the outcome. So like that. It should be about what is that, and always it should be about what is the end goal and who's being affected at the end goal. Who are the people that we are heading to? That's number one. But two, that sort of thinking ought to be part of any logical sports policy and sports development program. Meaning that if you have people, whether they are people who were born and raised, or people who are citizens by virtue of their parentage, or even people who have whatever connection it is to your country, who can serve,
Mhm.
who can assist in lifting you in one way or another, it should already be part of your program
Right.
that you are going to reach out to those individuals.
Yeah.
If you have people who are excelling in whatever sphere, it already ought to be part of your program.
Mhm.
You shouldn't have to wait. When the person comes to you for a program, you should say, I was just about to call you. Or I have a paper here, I have a white paper here that I meant
So,
to,
yeah.
the white paper that
Yeah.
in a year or 2 years, we were going to take this on board in a year or 2 years, but since you are willing to accelerate it, great. That
Make an,
should be
make an
part and
excuse.
parcel of your program. That should be part of your ethos. That should
Yeah.
be something that you have to question. I don't know, Foil and a couple of other Vincentians have done it. I know it's in
Right. Yeah.
for for basketball. I think it's been done. A couple of people in Dominica. I know that there have been basketballers who've contributed in one way or another, but I think there's so much more that can be done. When I started covering sports back in the 90s, there were about a half dozen St. Lucians who were competing at a reasonably high level in Canadian basketball. I know there's much more that we can do to really energize that group of guys,
Yeah.
get them involved, whether it be in terms of the general scholarships, getting opportunities for camps, using their resources to get balls into the hands of our primary school kids, whatever the case may be. I mean, there's so many interventions that we can and should have. Camps, obviously, as the gentleman was trying to do, always for me a great intervention. Um, just being able to get that exposure. Yeah, and I always think a camp should be paired, especially at a certain level. A camp should be paired with a clinic, so that you're doing a camp for the kids, but you also do a clinic for coaches at a certain level. So whether
Officials, yeah.
school coaches or secondary school coaches or
Mhm.
club coaches, community coaches, whatever have you. But you always have those two go hand in hand, so that you don't just have the camp and the kids get exposed for 1 week or whatever it is, and then they get left alone,
Mhm.
and we never have that exposure again. So I think those things should be automatic. Those things should not be something that you have to say, hey, how are we going to fit this in? A guy offers you help, a guy offers you to do something.
Mhm.
You say, okay, what do you need? It's not, so long as not maybe a $1 million investment. He's not asking to build a new stadium or whatever have you.
Mhm.
He's asking you to use a court, permission to use a court. These are things that if Dwayne Wade or Damian Lillard
were to come to the Caribbean and say, "Hey, I want to use a court,"
Yeah.
people would be falling over themselves.
Yeah.
And not for a camper.
Yeah.
If he just happens to stop by and say, "Hey, I want to go and shoot some hoops on X and Y Z in court,"
Yeah.
Politicians would be falling over themselves to come and take 2 shots.
Yeah.
With a LeBron James, a Damian Lillard, etc., etc.
In some cases, they might go and construct one.
It might well do.
Yeah.
But they'll go and take the pictures, they'll greet them, they'll do this. So let us take the same approach,
right,
our people, because the Damian Lillard and Dwayne Wade and whoever else, they're not going to come down here and identify our athletes and try to develop.
That's it, yeah.
They're not going to come down here and start programming for our kids. They're not going to come down there and hold a week-long free camp for our kids or 2-week-long free camp for our kids. They're not going to come and sit with coaches for a whole day. Okay? So let us look at where we can make those interventions, where we can make a difference in the lives of our young athletes, and make a difference in the development of the trajectory of our sports, and let us put those measures in place and try to facilitate them as best as we can. If it's a Division II collegiate athlete who can come and help us, who's of whatever parentage, 3-4 generations back, and he wants to come and help, God bless it. Please, yeah. What can I do to support you in furtherance of supporting my young people coming up? Let's do it.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
No problem. Every time.
Well, we talk about you. Wishing Sha'Carri all the best.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy the Olympics regardless. I'm going to be some great nights for me. I'm already starting to practice my self-care. Sniffing a little bit today.
Yeah.
Get the set them all. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to the remainder of the season, and I'm looking forward to seeing some Caribbean success. And certainly that women's 100 meters, despite the absence of Miss Richardson, I think is going to be the blue ribbon event for the Olympics for Tokyo 2020. That Simone just saying that even Bradley came down and did a camp. Bradley, my apologies. I'm not saying that none of them will do it, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they.
But yeah, Mike, I'm looking forward to that women's 400.
Yeah.
See some Caribbean success in that.
Certainly.
Karen McMaster identified by World Athletics back as one of the dark horse candidates for the hurdles from unfortunate that we don't Caribbean. I always love to the combined events that Kirk Felix won with them. Really go to new heights in the decathlon. And of course, looking forward to the men's javelin throw. We'll see a couple of Caribbean athletes, including Anderson Peters, doing their thing. So lots to look forward to in the next few weeks in Tokyo. And we're really excited about what's to come for the Caribbean moving forward.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Terry, once again. Always a pleasure having you for your broad insight into sports. And I thank you very much. You have a pleasant weekend.
Yes. Have a good weekend.
Okay, same to you. Right. Okay. Folks, that's Terry Finisterre and Rosalie in St. Lucia. And Terry being part of our, team. Gives a broad insight into what's happening. Looking forward to the Olympic Games. Well, would have been my 7th. Unfortunately, I would be in Tokyo. Yeah, I won't be in Tokyo. I'm actually in Minneapolis. And I'll be there while the Olympics on. Yeah, so I'm missing out on the Olympics. It would have been my 7th consecutive. Wow. Am I giving out my age? Yeah, it has been. Since then, I've been going to the Olympic Games. Rio was my last one. And yeah. So, guys, we want to wish all our, for Grenada in particular, all our competitors all the best. those who have qualified and those who got places through the World University places. And I'm wishing them all the best. The conversation is not about who's selected or not. Okay, the conversation is those who are representing, and we want to wish them all the best. Okay, as I indicated, Kirani James will be competing in Stockholm on Sunday, and come next week, sometime next week, Anderson Peters will be in Gateshead, that's in England, where he will be competing in the javelin event. Paul Phillips says it's on the 13th of July. He'll be competing in Gateshead in the Diamond League. That's Anderson Peters, and Kirani James will be competing on Sunday. That's tomorrow, in Stockholm. We were hoping to make a link up with Coach Javi Glantz, but that did not occur. And I want to thank Terry once again. Well, as you understood, that there's cricket going on, West Indies versus South Africa, West Indies versus South Africa at the cricket stadium in St. George's. And we also want to wish our national team, that's going to be the national men's team, all the best for the Gold Cup. They are preparing means that they have some of departed the island already for the Gold Cup here in the United States. It's Grenada's third time at the Gold Cup. 2009 was their first, 2011, their second two consecutive appearances at the Gold Cup. So this will be their third after 10 years, Grenada making a return to the Gold Cup. So, folks, I want to thank you. Oh, Alana, thank you once again for the information, and I really want to wish you and family, including Nazio, all the best for competition. Simone, I don't understand when you said the 19th. I don't understand about the 19th. 19th meaning okay. Right. Yeah. So as we indicated at the start, just in a few minutes before I wrap up, Nazio John qualified for the World Under 20 championships in athletics in Nigeria in August. He finished third in the 100 meters. That's in the boys. He's only 18 years. He clocked 10.33 seconds in the 10.33 seconds, finishing third. And by the way, guys, at 18 years, 10.33 seconds, that's in the Grenada standard, that's very fast, okay? That's very fast. And I know that he can go faster. He is determined, he is focused, he is disciplined, okay? And what I'm seeing and hearing is that Nazio's younger brother is on the trail as well, So we have some good prospects, and we just need to nurture, we need to encourage, we need to support. We do not need to frustrate. And that's my appeal to associations and others. We do not need to frustrate the process. We need to encourage and support. So whether it's athletics, whether it's football, netball, basketball, boxing, we need that support. Yeah, that's enough, guys. I think I've chatted enough for today, and want to wish you all the best. Pleasant weekend. It's a holiday weekend here in the United States, July 4th. Monday is actually a holiday. And I know for this weekend, lots of folks will be enjoying themselves, the barbecues and what have you, and things like that. Some parts of the U.S. is scorching, while some parts is, thunderstorms, weather related. Our hearts, our prayers also and thoughts to those in southern Florida, where the building collapsed, and there are so many missing. And by the way, so many immigrants as well are missing. A lot of immigrants have been trapped in that building collapse and are still missing in excess of 100. So our thoughts and prayers are also with us. Thank you, folks, once again. I do enjoy your company. Look forward for you being with us sometime next week, hopefully, God's will, on Thursday. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Theo. Alana, all the others, thank you for being part of the program. And all the best. Enjoy your weekend.